So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah,
Good
thank you.
afternoon, sir.
Hope you guys had a nice weekend.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Vanakkam.
Thank you. Namaste and Vanakkam. I did tell you guys, no? Good afternoon is, we can consider it to be international. You can even try the French one, bonjour, Okay. And Namaste is our national, I mean, you can say it in Tamil, we say namaskaram, namaskar or namaste. And of course, Vanakkam is Tamil. So all the three will be good for us. Yeah. Okay. So let's begin with a brief review of what we discussed about resources and then continue. Will any friend volunteer to present that brief review?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Ariman, go ahead.
Sir, under resources, we first talked about human resources, in which
Yes.
we considered the three terms knowledge, skills, and character.
Yeah, competence and character, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In character, we talked about honesty, discipline,
Yeah,
truthfulness,
basically
and
values and habits, Ariman.
values
You're
and
right.
habits. Okay.
You went into the details. You're right. I was trying to abstract. That's all, Ariman.
Okay.
So
Values and
in competence, we talk of the combination of knowledge and skills, and the character, values, habits, revealed behavior. Yeah, go ahead. You were right. You went into details. That's all.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So then later we talked about knowledge. What is the difference between explicit and tacit knowledge?
Very good.
Then then we talked about skills, the body skills, mind skills,
Yes.
and then we differentiate between how skills is different from knowledge.
Yeah. Correct.
And then we summarize like as a maintenance manager, how to scan market for good human resources, how to get good character, and importance of training of human resources.
Absolutely.
Then next we came to financial resources, where we talked about short term and long term,
Yes.
and we need to get a nice balance between short term and long term, and
Yes.
keeping in mind the return of investment.
Yes.
Then we talked about technology, infrastructure, and material in terms of capital, equipment, and consumables.
Yes.
In technology, we related technology with science and engineering. Like
Very
technology
good.
is knowledge of science and action of engineering.
Yeah. Technology is things that are embedded with the knowledge of science and action of engineering. So I'm taking the view that technology is in the form of things, physical objects. Finally, even you say software technology by itself without the hardware will be useless. I hope you agree with me. I may have a number of brilliant programs written down, but of what use are they if they cannot be compiled and worked on physically, and the information sent out through our VDUs, visual display units. So although we say software technology, we must understand that its value can be realized if and only if there is hardware. Unless we are talking of, I mean, even if we talk of telepathy and signals between our brains, we need the brain physically. So ultimately, technology we can look at as a thing that embeds that is embedded with the knowledge of science and the action of engineering. Yeah, go ahead. Good one. Good one. Yeah, go ahead.
Next, we talked about functional capabilities. Its model,
Yes.
taking two examples of pen and automobile.
Very good.
How the system, subsystem, and coming to the part thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
And we
in
talked of primary and secondary functional capabilities, Aryaman.
Okay, sir.
You may recall that. We talked of primary functional capabilities and secondary functional capabilities, and even tertiary. I mean, I didn't mention tertiary. Sometimes you can identify tertiary functional capabilities. Yeah, go ahead.
Then we discuss how as a maintenance manager, how we can use functional capability, that is to trace fault using fault tree analysis type
Yes.
examples.
Yes.
And then we talked about infrastructure, how infrastructure is it's like buildings plus utilities.
Yes.
Infrastructure itself consists many technologies.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
then we finally talked about material, what is material and which material is to be used where specifically and how.
Yeah. In fact, we can talk about static and dynamic infrastructure, correct? Like our walls and all which enclose the room, we can consider as static, stationary infrastructure. Dynamic means moving, like electricity, water, communications infrastructure, something is moving, something is being transferred. Yeah. Anything else, please? Okay. If we are not able to recall, I just wanted to summarize this. We talked about resources because they form the input side to management. I hope all of you recall the diagram that we had drawn early on. You remember inputs and then getting into the value addition process or the production system or the operation system, and then the outcomes of our work, mission, vision, objectives, goals, and then a feedback going back so that we work on the inputs and on the processes, isn't it? The value addition processes. So, and the whole thing operates in an environment of uncertainty. Uncertainty can hit you anywhere, can hit you on the input side, can hit you on the feedback, can hit on the process, can hit on the output side. In fact, uncertainty comes basically from a lot from the environment, or also there is internal uncertainty that can happen within an organization. So that's why we finished our discussion about the output side, mission, vision, objectives and goals, and then we are now discussing the input side, resources, human, financial, technology, infrastructure and materials. Okay. Now we move further. The next basic resource that we will discuss are organizational and managerial resources. Now organizational and managerial resources are typically what we can call as the intangibles, the soft resources. See, technology, as I told you, is a thing, it's hard. Human resources, you can say it's hard in the sense there's physical entities there. Financial resources, okay, it's soft and hard. Says money literally is soft, but today if you look at electronic transfers, there is a softness to the money. But it is hard in the sense that it's very tangible. You can count and you can do arithmetic, mathematics, everything with it. But when you come to organizational and managerial resources, that kind of arithmetic becomes a little more difficult, because quantifying some aspects or characteristics of these resources becomes a little more difficult. Okay. Now, what do we mean by organizational or managerial resources? Okay. Sometimes you can get what is called an emergent resource from your fundamental resources. Now, what do we mean by emergent resource? When you combine two or more resources, you can get an emergent resource, which is usually intangible. Okay. I hope you understand this point. Okay. Let me give you a simple example so that you understand what is called that emergent resource. The finest example I can share with you is that of two then young tennis players, Indian tennis players called Mahesh Bhupati and Leander Paes. All of you know that they were world number one in doubles for a long time. This is also a fantastic example of what is synergy. The whole is more than the sum of the parts, is greater than the sum of the parts. So if anybody asks you what is synergy, I'm going to share with you this fine example. Okay. Now, if you take singles rankings, the Association of Tennis Professionals, ATP rankings, you will find that the best rank or the highest rank that Leander Paes enjoyed was somewhere in the 90s, maybe 91 or 92. That was his highest ranking, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I'll be happy to be corrected, but if I recall right, it was in the 90s, early 90s, 91 or 92. Similarly, if you consider the individual players rankings, Mahesh Bhupati's was somewhere near 300, somewhere above 305, if I'm not mistaken. But I think all of us must be really completely awestruck, or we must be wondering, how is it that a player who's ranked above 90 in the individual player rankings and another player ranked above 300 in the individual player rankings combine and become world number one? And they stayed world number one, please correct me, but my memory serves right, for almost 5 or 6 years. They were world number one. How did that happen? Now, this is synergy. So when Leander Paes and Mahesh Bhupati combined, a different magic started happening. So they became a new entity. So it's two entities in harmony and great resonance, which is causing them to become number one. And you will notice from their track record that they consistently beat doubles teams, where the individual players of those doubles teams were much higher ranked than them individually. So there's some magic in combining human resources. And this is a visible example, verifiable example. I'm sure you're convinced that synergy is real, because it has been demonstrated by Pays and Bhupati. Okay, I can give you many examples, but that's not the point. The point is for us to recognize that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Likewise, we can have organizational and managerial resources where the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Now, I hope all of you are clear about the concept of emergent resource that I told you. So the Pays Bhupati combination became an emergent resource built of the two and their integration. Okay, please understand, the whole is equal to the sum of the parts multiplied by their integration. And the second equation, the whole is equal to the sum of the parts plus their integration. Both equations are true, because if integration is 0, the whole is no longer the whole if you use the multiplication. The whole is equal to sum of the parts multiplied by integration. If integration is 0, the whole is 0. And the interpretation of whole is 0 is the whole is not a whole. Are you understanding? Fine. And the whole is equal to the sum of the parts plus their integration. If integration is 0, and if you use the addition, only the sum of the parts remain with you, not the whole. Okay. And of course, the whole can be less than the sum of the parts, which is inefficiency. And very often in human systems, you can observe inefficiency abundantly. Just look around you and you'll see an abundance of inefficiency all around throughout the world. You can see examples of synergy also. I'm not saying it's all inefficiency, but the sad part is very often in human systems, people work with their egos in a negative way and they spoil the integration. Okay, they sort of go into the opposite of integration. I don't want to use the word differentiation. That may not be a right word, but definitely the whole degrades, and people start pulling each other down, and the whole system settles to inefficiency. Okay, so the opposite of synergy is inefficiency. Now, what are these organizational and managerial resources that you can have which contribute to a whole which is more than the individual resources? Can you take a guess, please? I already told you they are intangible. Can you take a guess as to what could constitute these organizational and managerial resources? Try, always take a guess. There's nothing wrong. It's a surefire way to learn quickly also. Anyone? Let me give you a different context so that it helps you. Can you relate to a resource in your families which is more than the members of the family? This should be easy. I agree, the organizational context may not be striking you very directly, but what about your own families or your group of friends where something is more than the members of the group of friends or the members of the family? Something that is commonly accessible and usable by the members of the families or the group of friends.
So, member of family, a house
Yeah,
that we
but
see.
what is it that happens, Ariman? As you join as a family, like Pays and Bhupati, something nice could happen to the whole family, where the
So,
family unit is more than the individual members put together.
happiness,
Very good. So anything else? Very good.
like
You're in the right direction. It could be
like
joy, cheer, happiness. morale. I mean, morale is generally not used in the context of a family, but I mean, your feeling of collectiveness, the collective affection, trust, etc. Any resources that are common to the family that enable all this?
So
Inheritances.
love.
I'm not talking of refrigerator, microwave oven, air conditioner, TV, etc. I'm not talking of that.
Sir,
Some other resource.
inheritances.
Yeah.
Sir, inheritances.
What is that, Arvind?
Inheritances, sir.
Yeah, what is it? Give me example.
Sir, inheritances, for example, maybe some land or something
Very
that
good. The
gets passed down from
documents, Arvind.
generation.
Very good example, Arvind.
Yes.
Thank you. What about the documents of movable and immovable property? Do you agree? They store some data, information, and knowledge. Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
And do you agree those documents are resources for your family?
Yes, sir.
Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So like that in organizations, things like databases, the written down standard operating procedures, the protocols, in fact, you'll be surprised, the spirit of the organization, which is reflected by the mission, vision, objectives, and goals, and when it's stated explicitly, it is a common resource for the entire organization. But it is not a hard resource. I mean, don't say a notice board that contains the mission and vision and the value systems, quality, policy, etc. Okay, that's a physical object, but the contents, the meaning, they are not tangible. I hope you understand. They're intangible, but they mean something to the workers and everybody in the organization. Okay, so the databases, the legal documents, everything forms an organizational and managerial resource which you can use. Your quality practices, I'm sure all of you agree, when organizations go for certification, the ISO certification, whatever it may be, 9,000 or 14,000 or any other certification, they have to maintain a lot of documentation. And all that documentation, although it's in physical form, I'm more focusing on the contents that they hold and the value that it presents to the organization. I hope you understand the concept of organizational and managerial resources now. Are you clear, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir.
And I hope you agree, things like where it becomes whole, where it's more than the human resources, please understand, suppose you have very successful practices, team practices like or group practices like quality circles. Several organizations have formed quality circles. People from different functions of the organization come together to discuss some areas where the organization could benefit immensely through some novel quality practices, some creative practices. So there the whole becomes more than the sum of the parts, and the result of that is the whatever documentation that may happen or whatever records that may be created. Are you understanding? So all the communications that happen within the organization, in fact, you'll be surprised. I'm sure all of you will agree that when you work in an organization today, performance evaluation, periodic performance evaluation is quite common. So the performance evaluation and the reviews and the documents that come are part and parcel of the organizational and managerial resources. Any manager, ideally they should aid any manager who comes and who may not even know the people who are working, but the manager should be able to look at the record of the people with whom he or she will be associated and make some judgments, form some judgments as to the responsibilities that could be given to different people, isn't it? I just remember, I mean, if you want to understand this part, even if you watch IPL, which is going on right now, and yesterday was, I think, very thrilling, no? In a single Sunday, you had 2 super overs, and in the second one, two matches with super overs, and in the second match, there were 2 super overs. I mean, it's very fascinating. I think this is either the first or second time 2 super overs are being bowled in the IPL in a single match. Of course, I'm not a great guy on data on IPL and all, but I just watch and have fun. So it's very interesting, isn't it? So there are lots of very interesting things happening in order for you to understand. Why did I talk of this? Please note in the previous match for CSK, I think Captain Dhoni gave the ball to our Jadeja to bowl the last over, and almost in my family, whoever was there was guessing, okay, this guy is going to go for 2 sixes, and if I'm not mistaken, Akshar Patel hit 3 sixes, not 2 sixes. Okay, at least we felt that was a wrong move, but maybe, I mean, given Dhoni's experience, maybe he was correct. His logic may have been correct, but didn't work on the ground, isn't it? So sometimes, how did Dhoni as the captain take that decision to hand over the ball the last over to Ravindra Jadeja, isn't it? So obviously he's used some logic, etc., which has come out from his own observations. Now this is intangible. That judgment and the decision and the action that follows are intangible. The ball is tangible, all right. The bat is tangible, all right. The six is tangible, all right. Okay. But something else is happening in all that. So organizational and managerial resources are those resources, databases, information bases, knowledge bases, knowledge repositories, standard operating procedures, memorandum of association, so many reports and reviews that you have, your audit reports, your financial audit reports, your human resource audit reports, isn't it? Your operations audit reports, so many things are audited. All of them are repositories of data, information, and knowledge, which can be used by managers. They are intangible. Please, I repeat, I'm not talking of the physical files in which they are held, or the CDs or the hard disks in which the information is stored. I'm not talking of that. That's the technology aspect. I'm talking of the contents, the data, information, and knowledge. Is this clear, please?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you. Then, how do you judge the value of these organizational managerial resources? See, let me help you. The moment you go to human resources, you can evaluate the quality of your human resources in terms of knowledge, skills, competences, and character, values, habits, revealed behavior, etc., or steady revealed behavior, and so on. So you can judge the quality of every person. As a manager, you are the captain of your team. You know the team, and you can judge your team, members of the team. You can judge their combinations, how they might work, etc. All of us do this. It's very common in organizations. When you become a manager, it's almost automatic that you will do that when you work with your teams. Financial resources, you can judge. In fact, there are very many good metrics. I mean, metrics, not matrix, sorry. It is METRICS. There are many metrics that will inform you about the quality of financial resources in terms of some ratios and so on, which you can understand. Okay, so you can, as a financial manager, you will know the health of the organization in terms of these metrics. For example, how good are you doing on cash in hand? How good are you doing in working capital, accounts receivables, etc. Okay, how good are you doing on your equipment assets, depreciation, and so on. So there are judgments you can make. How good are your reserves and surpluses? Okay. What kind of dividends have you paid to your shareholders? So like this, there are judgments you can make, debt equity ratio, and so on. Now, how do you judge the worth of your organizational and managerial resources? I'm sure you can also judge the worth of your technology, infrastructure, and material resources. I'm sure all of you have a motorcycle or a scooter or even a mobile phone where you can judge the quality. So how do you judge the quality or value of your organizational and managerial resources? Any thoughts, please? I told you, data, information, knowledge. Yeah, Vivek, try, attempt. Hey, Vivek, you switched on. What happened? Suddenly you get back.
So
Yeah.
based on outputs.
Anything else,
revenue.
Aryaman? Yeah, Arvind, try, please.
So revenue the company makes at the end of the year.
That's indirect. I'm saying directly. See, Arvind, Aryaman and others who attempted to answer, I'm just asking a simple question. Let's say you have the, in your phone, you have your contacts list. Do you agree that's data for you?
Yes, sir.
Now, that data has some value for you. So, how do you derive the value from your contacts list? That is stationary, but you're able to derive value. How is that?
It allows us to connect to
So
the people.
very good, very good. So now you tell me the value. You talked of the process, correct? Avinash, that was a good answer, but you talked of the process. Actually, how do you derive the value? How do you value that list which you have? I'm taking such a simple example like a contacts list on your phone. That's a resource for you, and it goes beyond the phone itself. Okay. Yeah, try, Avinash.
Yes, so the value would be that we can get in touch with
Very good. It's called
the
reachability.
yeah, reachability. Yeah, exactly.
Reachability is one dimension of the value, isn't it?
Yes,
Correct. Do you agree? Comprehensiveness is another value. The more comprehensive your organizational managerial resources, the better they are. Correct? Do you agree missing data or information can really make your work less efficient?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
obviously. So comprehensiveness, reachability, accessibility. Now that is how you judge the organizational managerial resources. Clarity, reliability. I've given you so many characteristics. Accessibility, comprehensiveness, clarity, reliability, usability. So like this, there are various qualities or characteristics of those resources that from which you can derive value. Please note that I'm using the word value because in the middle of the diagram, you have the value addition process. So the resource comes in and you do something with that resource and derive extra value. In fact, I would even say something emerges by your use of those resources. You're mixing the human, financial, technology, infrastructure, materials, organizational, managerial resources. You blend them and then you derive new value, which of course, as rightly pointed out, ultimately has to show in the outcomes. That part I agree. Eventually, it has to show in your organizational outcomes. But for you to do a critical analysis of the details of your operations, your value addition processes, you need this kind of a what do you call as a critical picture of this organizational managerial resources. Is this clear, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I hope you understand the soft or intangible nature of these resources. Okay? Data, information, knowledge, and so on. Please understand, a lot of the knowledge possessed by people in your organization could be tacit, as I pointed out. It's something that they can demonstrate, but they cannot express. I told you, if you go and ask your moms, how do you cook so well? Your mom may find it very difficult to express. She can give you the recipe, but you try the damn recipe, same process, you will not get the same taste. Okay. So that has to be understood and appreciated. So a lot of that knowledge is tacit knowledge. It's a resource. It is residing in the human resources. But I mentioned this tacit knowledge because one of the attempts that many managers are making nowadays in very good firms is to capture tacit knowledge through some processes. Okay. And there are methods for that. How do you capture tacit knowledge and try to transform it into explicit knowledge or expressible codified knowledge or codifiable knowledge, knowledge that can be represented, codified. So that is a challenge in the organizational and managerial systems. Okay, good. So if this is clear, and I hope you understood the characteristics of these systems, accessibility, reachability, reliability, usability, and so on, okay, comprehensiveness and so on. I will go one step further. The last resource that we will consider are networks and relationships. Now, you may recall that I had mentioned to you that the first 4 basic resources, human, financial, technology, infrastructure and materials, and organizational and managerial resources, are internal to the organization. They are held by the organization. In some sense, they are enjoyed directly, and I would even say to some extent owned by the organizations. But when it comes to networks and relationships, the ownership can be challenged, but the enjoyment need not be challenged. Okay, the leveraging need not be challenged. You can leverage a network and a relationship that you have. Okay, so networks and relationships are external resources which could be tangible or intangible, or there may be a combination of tangibility and intangibility, especially if it's a human being outside the organization whom you know. So typically the question is, who do you know who can help your organization? Networks and relationships. Okay. For example, if you want to know some maintenance standards and you don't have direct access to them, you may have to go through somebody to gain access to the standards. Okay. Very often we do this. Who do you know? That's your networks and relationships. Even in college, if you had stayed in hostels, you will understand. For you, your friends are your networks and relationships. They may help you study effectively, isn't it? So sometimes friends can also take you in a different direction. So I'm talking of the value-laden opportunities that friends give. They can always provide you with wonderful experiences. Like my friends gave me very wonderful experiences. I can even share with you today, if at all I've worked as a teacher, primarily it's because of my close friends who were with me in BITS Pilani many years ago when I studied. Okay. Because they are the guys who told me, Ganesh, you seem to be a natural teacher, why don't you consider teaching? And they set me thinking. I never knew that. In fact, I can narrate this to you. Very often many of us are like the proverbial Hanuman, who didn't know his own strength. Somebody had to point out to him. Many of us, almost all of us are like that. Somebody has to point out to you, hey boss, hey both, it's a very good strength you have. Why don't you leverage it? So friends, networks and relationships have meaning even in the context of organizations. Partnerships, okay? What are good partnerships that can happen? Along the supply chain, you can have many partners. Even on the regulatory aspects, you could have very good networks and relationships, connecting you right up to the minister if you want. So all these things matter. What are your networks and relationships? What are the foundations for those networks and relationships, and so on? Okay. Can you give me some examples on networks and relationships in organizations? How they can use the networks and relationships? By networks, I don't mean hard optical fiber networks, etc. I'm not talking of that. I mean the intangible relationships and the contact points that you have, and their contact points, and so on. Any example?
Like for example, a company can leverage an existing client to get new leads.
Very good example. Now, yeah, very good example. In a systematic way, cascading of clients can happen. If you have very good, this is actually a damn good example. And I hope, I think it was Avinash, the opposite can also happen. Do you agree? Your clients can mess the organization also if something is wrong, correct? Because
Yes, sir.
Very difficult, especially in the service industry. You can have serious service failures, you know, in either the what you call the B2C, the business to customer business context, or the B2B, the business to business context, isn't it? So in all those contexts, or even B2G, business to government context, you can have a lot of issues. Service failures can happen, and there, in order to recover from the service failure, it is possible that your networks and relationships may come in handy. But the assumption is that the organization is basically seen as an organization with integrity, and is not out to pull the wool over the eyes of the customers or the clients, which will also be seen in the long run. You may recall just a couple of classes ago I told you, in many cases, rang nikal jayega. In Tamil we say saayam veluthurum, isn't it? So that the colors will show sooner or later. How can fundamental character be changed in organizations? It's very difficult. You will not be able to do that. Okay. So networks and relationships are very useful for the organization, especially to work on its softer aspects or intangible aspects, like image, reputation, and so on. Okay. And sometimes even security in the organization, stability in the organization. Okay. Correcting things in the organization. Can you give me any other examples where a network or relationship can be used by organizations? Any one more example? Other than clients. Clients was a correct answer, actually. Any other type?
Supplier contacts.
Good, Ajay. Okay, always I'll give you a simple rule. Look at your family as an organization first, and then we'll go to business organizations. Can you give me an example where a family could use its networks and relationships? Very easy. That is, how do you use networks and relationships, particularly people who don't belong to your family, for a justifiable and honorable part of your family's journey? Very easy, man.
Asking for loans from relatives.
Very good, Arvind. When the necessity comes, you do use the contacts for getting loans. And very often in the context of India, if you looked at the concept of arranged marriages, just look at the effectiveness of the network and relationship in arranged marriages. Socially, you can see so many advantages. Now, I'll ask you a question. Just like you gave good answers for the characteristics of organizational and managerial resources, reachability, accessibility, reliability, comprehensiveness, and so on, can you identify some characteristics of networks and relationships from which you derive value?
So impact of relation.
Can you be more specific, Aryaman? You're in the right direction. Your thinking is correct. Can you be more specific? Can you go a little further down the word impact?
So,
can you dig deeper? Yeah.
Like how closely we are related to
very good. Strength of relationship. Correct? Strength of relationship. Now, this is very important. Or the moment you say strength of relationship, you're talking of things like trustworthiness, reliability, and so on. Okay. Likewise, do you agree the reach of your network is also very important? The reach of your network. That you know somebody, and you know that somebody knows somebody else who could be of value to you. So, what is the reach of that somebody whom you know, who is in your direct network? Are you understanding?
Yes, sir.
So, reach, reliability, trustworthiness, responsiveness. Do you agree? By responsiveness, what do we mean? When you reach out to a member in your network and who is relating to you, the speed of response, the accuracy of response, All these things matter, correct?
Yes, sir.
And sir, reciprocity as well, right?
Pardon?
Reciprocity.
Reciprocity. Yeah,
Yes.
sorry. Reciprocity. You're correct. You're correct. So these are all characteristics that belong to this resource, networks and relationships. Are you clear? So every resource, every basic resource that we discussed also has characteristics which we use as managers. We judge those characteristics in leveraging those resources, in blending those resources in the value addition process. Of course, please understand, these are all not, there are no guarantees that things will happen the way you planned. I hope all of you understand that. You have to plan, obviously, because in order to achieve your goals, start time, end time, you have to do planning with your resources. Planning concerns how do you mobilize your resources and how do you allocate and deploy your resources. Okay. So you need to identify and mobilize resources. Mobilize means you gain control over the resources. Okay. So a manager says, I have mobilized the resources, means the resources are available for deployment. Okay. And since the resources are limited, you will be allocating and deploying them. What is allocation? If you have several tasks to be performed at a time and you do not have sufficient resources, you will have to prioritize the use of the resources for specific tasks out of that entire set. Let's say you have 10 tasks to perform and you have only 3 resources, which means at any point in time, you can allocate those 3 resources to any combination of 3 tasks from those 10 tasks. 10C3, okay, 10 choose 3, if you want to put it that way. So many ways you can combine and allocate the resources, but that has to be prioritized. And for that prioritization, your knowledge and judgment of those resources is important. That is the reason why we discussed about the characteristics of the resources. I'm sure even in your own homes, I have seen this in my own extended family. My brother-in-law, whenever he wanted to deal with financial matters, he would delegate the authority to his second son. And whenever he wanted to resolve some relationship matters, he would delegate it to his first son, something like this. So because all of us have our unique strengths, somebody is damn good on financial matters and you say, okay, you take care. And you cannot entrust in this case, he could not entrust the financial responsibilities to his first son, who, I'm not saying he was incompetent, the second son was superior. So naturally he drifted to his second son. So this I'm talking of how do you leverage the value from those resources. That's why I give you family examples so that you understand this. Okay? And I'm sure even within our families, suppose you want somebody to do a bargain, hard bargaining in a shop, all of us don't have the same capability to bargain. You'll find somebody who's damn good in bargaining. Okay. I can give you some example. In my own family context, I can give you fine examples. My niece's husband is just too good in bargaining. I've seen him so many times. So this kind of, everybody has those characteristics. So in order to achieve a goal, you have to blend in those resources and you have to mobilize the resources. You have to identify them, mobilize them, and then allocate them if you have 10 tasks and deploy them finally. And only then work starts happening. Then of course, you have to observe and monitor and control and take feedback. Why? Because uncertainty will hit you anytime. This is what happens in the cycle, in the work cycle. This is what happens. Okay. You have your outcomes which are clear. You do your plans by which you work with your resources, identify, mobilize, allocate, deploy, and then work starts happening. Uncertainty hits. You have to do the whole thing again. The cycle of management starts. This is what we refer to as management by design. I hope this is very clear today. Are you clear about the resources the categorization, 5 fundamental basic resources and their characteristics and how you can leverage them. Are you clear? At least I've given you the basics.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. And this whole process of the work cycle, starting from your knowledge and statement of outcomes, mission, vision, objectives and goals, we'll concentrate on goals because goals are SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant and time bound. So we'll focus on goals. So I want to achieve this goal. Maybe you say I want to achieve this goal 2 months later and I have time on my hand, okay, whatever the goal may be. It may be fulfilling a customer order in 2 months with the required quality and service, responsiveness, etc., interactions, etc. So you blend in your resources, human, financial, everything. After all, to fulfill your customer order, you need materials, etc. And you may be operating in a system where you cannot draw an advance financial amount from your customer, okay. So that kind of a situation where may be there. So you may have to operate out of capital, that your financial capital you have, or take a loan and say I'll repay the loan. And not only that, very often in business to business, credit terms are there. Your customer will not pay immediately. The customer will, you generally give credit to your customer and say, tell the customer you can pay after so many days. And it can be a part of the contract of the entire transaction, that you will provide these goods and services to your customer and your customer will pay back after some time. See, this is very important because we will be talking about the subject of risk management briefly. So in this kind of a work transaction, there is a risk all over the place. So in that work cycle, these resources have to be blended in, value has to be churned and provided. This is management by design. State what you want to do, mission, vision, objectives and goals. Why you want to do, we will discuss that, and how you want to do, which is another aspect, which is strategy and then your tactics, etc. Okay. Now there is another thing I told you, management by default. There are 2 approaches to management: management by design and management by default. Okay. I'll just have a brief introduction because this is not something which has to be studied deeply, and we need not do that in our course. You must have general knowledge of what is meant by management by default. Okay, that you must possess. When do you use the word default option? Ordinarily, when do you use the word default? This is a default condition. When do you use that?
No other option.
No, it's not exactly no other option. You may have a choice. I mean, again, you're not wrong, but you're not hitting bullseye. Okay,
Sir,
I'll ask you a simple question. This will help you. Have all of you used MS Word?
Yes, sir.
Arey, come on, yeah. Yes or
Yes,
no?
sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all of you have used MS Word. Can you tell me what font will come if you don't give any instructions? Ordinarily, what font comes in MS Word?
So Arial Black,
Pardon?
Arial Black,
No, I'm not talking of the color. I'm talking of the font, geometry. You try. Huh?
Calibri.
Calibri. Earlier?
Times New Roman.
See, so when you don't give instructions, the program itself gives you an option. That's called the default option. I mean, and you're okay with it. Are you understanding? We are all okay. Okay, Times Roman, I'll start typing. If you wish to change the font, then you intervene and change. I'm giving a very simple example of default option. Okay. I can give you one more example of default option. Let's say you have a fixed deposit in a bank, okay, and sometimes they may give you a default option. If you don't come and renew on the date of maturity, the bank might say the default option is we keep it renewed for a certain period. Are you okay? Sometimes that option is given, that I may not come, so default option is you automatically renew the fixed deposit for another term, whatever that term may be. Okay. Like this, there are default options. Okay. I'll give you another example, especially in the south, this is common. I do not know the north. I mean, I may not be able to confidently tell you. Suppose a surprise guest comes to your home and you wish to serve something. One of the easiest things to do is sweet rava kesari, default option. So when the guest comes, you just quickly prepare sweet rava kesari and give the guest. So these are all simple default options. So I hope all of you understood the concept of default option. Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we will continue. I think it's time. We'll continue tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you, sir.